Hi everyone, we're back and hopefully things work this time around. Um, Thank you everyone who's tuning in. We'll be good to go in a few seconds. Perfect.
Hi.
Finally worked out. Hi Rishabh.
Hi, how are you guys?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Great. So hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's Instagram Live by India Development Review. I'm Danaya and I'm going to be in conversation with Rishabh Lalani, who's an independent fundraising strategist. We're going to be talking about everything retail fundraising, from why it's an important fundraising strategy to consider to what some of the potential challenges with it might be. So I'll just give like a couple more seconds for people to join in and then we can get started. And once again, really sorry about the technical glitches. They always pop up at the wrong moment. Great. Okay, great. So maybe I think we can get started. I'll quickly start off by introducing Rishabh. As many of you may already know, Rishabh is one of India's leading independent fundraising strategists, who in his journey so far has raised more than 80 crore rupees for various nonprofits. His efforts to raise funds for COVID relief were featured in India Today and The Logical Indian. Rishabh is also an advisor to the Rainmatter Foundation, India's largest climate philanthropy, and he has also previously consulted with the Grow Fund, anchored by Eaglegift Foundation, YWNXT, anchored by UNICEF, and with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Thank you once again for joining us today, Rishabh. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So yeah, I just wanted to start off our conversation today by maybe setting some context. Typically in India, we've seen the conversation around fundraising focus on two groups, either high net worth individuals or companies who are giving under the CSR Act. But over the last few years, I think especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a slight shift. We've seen more and more nonprofits trying to raise smaller amounts of money from larger pools of individual donors in a practice that we popularly call retail fundraising. But despite the potential that this form of fundraising has to be a sustainable source of income, nonprofits are sometimes a little hesitant to take it on because it's believed like this retail fundraising is just believed to be hard or complex to execute. So Rishabh, could you maybe just start us off by telling us what retail fundraising is in a nutshell, and why should a nonprofit be seriously considering this form of fundraising? Like, what's in it for them?
I grew up in Calcutta, and one of the most, I think in the next few days we're going to have Durga Puja there, and people used to knock on our doors and ask for money. For people in Maharashtra, Mumbai, Ganpati is probably one of those occasions,
Right.
and there are different such festivals across India. And when people pool in small sums of money from multiple people to form a large sort of central pool, that's retail fundraising. And in the simplest form, right? Now, that that can be, you can look at retail fundraising as collecting money for a single event, right? So it could be something that you're doing one time where you're, doing relief, or you're buying something which is an asset. For example, the Statue of Liberty was purchased, it was installed using crowdfunding,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Right? So you could look at it as one-off. You could also look at it as long-term, which is that there's something that's going on all the time, and you sort of pay recurring money for that. For example, Netflix is an example of recurring membership, small sums of money pulled in. Insurance is an example of that, right? Where small sums of money are pulled in uh, for a larger pool of people, and then it benefits multiple people, right? So all of these are different kinds of retail fundraising, depending on how large the kitty is, right? So it could be someone paying 500 rupees a month, for, let's say, in perpetuity or for a limited period of time. It could also be someone paying, maybe 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 rupees at one go, but every year, right? So all of these form different forms of retail fundraising, right? Now, obviously, if you look at this from a ROI perspective, right? So if someone writes a proposal, and let's say they write 100 proposals in a year, and one of them sort of works out, and you get 20 lakh rupees through that proposal, right? And if the cost of your resource is anywhere between 6 to 8 lakhs, it's still worth it, right? Because I mean, it's easier, right? But if you look at going door to door or going person to person and doing this large scale, it takes a lot of effort, right? And so people find it very time intensive, effort intensive. But what most organizations don't realize, and some of the bigger ones have realized, is that when you have a large base of people supporting you, it adds both credibility and legitimacy to your work, right? Because anytime you're doing something, you can turn around and say, hey, listen, X number of people support us, so we must be doing something right. Okay. So that's one. The second thing that most people don't realize is that this money is an exchange of trust with the brand, with the organization. And so what essentially is happening is that um, you are getting money in exchange for the value proposition as opposed to the project, right? This means there's greater flexibility to try things, there's greater flexibility to do things, there's scope for doing innovation, pilots, there's scope for failure, and there's also the possibility of building a community of people, right? So most of the work that we do in the social sector uh, revolves around transformation and the transfer of power, right? So when you have such a large base of people following you, and let's say you're working on gender, or you're working on masculinity, or you're working on the environment, right? So not only are you influencing people or the communities that you're working with, but you're also influencing or sort of encouraging people who are supporting you. So it works both ways, right? So there are multiple reasons to do this, right? But because it's time intensive, there's some element of effort, and there's also an element of cost to this. Most people tend to think that it's way too much for them. There's also something to be said about the fact that people look at this in the short term, right? And that has to do with funding cycles. So most corporate money or HNI money comes for a year. And so organizations don't have the leeway to look at 3-year, 5-year, 10-year cycles. And that causes them a lot of anxiety while investing in something like this, because the return for something like this will probably come. I mean, if you're doing a crowdfunding campaign, yes, you'll see a return in 20 days, 30 days, but there's a lot of time involvement, which means you're taken away from the program. But if you're doing recurring retail funding, which means that people give money every month, then there's also a cost element which you have no visibility for till at least 18 months. Right? There are multiple reasons why people don't necessarily subscribe to this model immediately.
Right. No, thank you for that, and thank you for making that connection between it's not just about the communities you're supporting, but how retail fundraising can be a way to build, within society, some kind of consensus around an issue or consensus around a particular, policy or things like that. So thank you so much for making that connection. Are there any examples of someone who's kind of taken that step and seen, like in your mind, who's taken that step to, and this has kind of paid off, right? Taking a step towards retail fundraising and seeing this change come through?
Well, I mean, some of the large organizations like Amnesty and Greenpeace are great examples of fundraising through retail. The other great example of someone doing this is Make a Difference, which raises money from its communities for childcare costs. Right. There are several organizations, for example, Apni Shala, where I'm on the board, does a crowdfunding campaign every year. Right. And I mean, I'm sure there are many nonprofits that do crowdfunding campaigns one time. The caution there is that unless you do a campaign every year, it's most likely that there's no problem. Right. So there's no continuity in this, right? In the crowdfunding model, right? But for example, Make a Difference has volunteers that come in, support the community, raise money for them every year, and all the childcare costs are borne by them. So what happens for Make a Difference, for example, is phenomenal, right? They work with childcare institutions across India, and whatever is a direct child cost is borne by local communities. Therefore, they have a stake in the child's well-being,
Right.
but the organizational costs then are raised, and it frees up the organization to then raise money through institutions or HNIs or foundations for their work and supporting the communities that they're working with, right? So it's a great sort of distinguisher, so to
Right.
say. And childcare costs are easier to raise for because they're tangible, right?
Right.
So that's the other thing in retail giving, right? It works very well for causes that are touch and feel,
Hmm.
right? So if you have a childcare home, if you have an educational program where people can see the children, if you have a healthcare program where you're delivering medicine, or anything that's tangible, reasonably tangible, then it's easier to convince the person on the other end to give
Right.
money for that cause, right? So these are some examples, and I must say that uh, it, a lot of this is also very, very powerful for what one may consider left of center causes.
Hmm.
So
Right.
where the belief in the cause is derived from a sense of ideology, derived from a sense of connection. I mean, the RSS, which is one of the largest volunteer-run organizations in India, and has shakhas across the country, actually raises money through retail giving. There's
Yeah.
actually Guru Dakshina Day, people donate there, and it's a fine example of how retail giving functions. And there's a strong connection to the ideology there. Or whether in states that were ruled by communists, right, where everyone used to donate to the party system. So these are all great examples of retail fundraising at scale that is literally in perpetuity.
Right. Right. No, thank you for that. And I think the point you made about what kind of causes might be easier to retail fundraise for leads me perfectly to my next question, which is there a right time, in a sense, for organizations to be thinking about moving into retail fundraising, right? Are there any sort of, factors that they need to consider when they're making an assessment for themselves, like to know that this is the next step or this may be right for me and my organization?
Um, if you're a young organization just starting out, I'd say try retail fundraising.
Okay, that's interesting. Could you tell us
So,
more?
I mean, in general, investment philosophy is right. The first set of people who donate money are friends, family,
Right,
and fools, right?
right,
Which is your first degree network, first degree connections, people who you know in your immediate circles, and people you've not been in touch with, but if you just kind of write to them, maybe they'll give you money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one stage of organizational sort of space where you can try. Crowdfunding at that time also helps you build community. So I think I must kind of say that when you're looking at retail fundraising, don't think of raising money, but think of raising a community,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So if you think of building a community, you're most likely going to be successful. But if you're going to think of people as sources of money, then it's
Mm.
going to feel very, very hectic,
Yeah.
right? Because this is the community you want to go back to for anything and everything, right?
Right.
And that's worth kind of thinking about. Um, and there's a great example of this. There's an online community called Mitti Ke Rang. I
Okay.
think they have about 1 lakh people across their social media platforms, across countries, who contribute, buy, sell at the click of a button, right?
Right.
So this community-based support system is very, very useful.
Right.
Uh, the other stage at which one should do it is if you become really, really adept at raising money from unrestricted money from different causes or different
Mm.
spaces, maybe raising money from a donor to invest in the idea of retail fundraising. Now, if
Right.
at this stage you are raising money, then you must think of a few very crucial things, right? When you're raising money for retail fundraising, then think of databasing,
Mm.
right? What does it take for you to database all of the organizational contacts in one place? Now, organizational contacts mean people in your phone book, people in your social media accounts, people in your Gmail accounts, and people in the accounts and social media of those who've been working with you for a really long time.
Right.
right? So database all of it, right? Figure out a way in which every visiting card, every new contact on your phone is immediately transferred to the organizational database, right? This database should be connected to a CRM, preferably something like a HubSpot or a free CRM that's offered by ERP Next or Civic CRM. There's a bunch of these across the sector.
Mhm.
You can choose what works for you, right? And start tagging donors, start tagging their behavior, start tagging the milestones you want to track with them. For example, sending your first newsletter is the first milestone, right? Second newsletter might be the second milestone. When they give the first donation, then an onboarding call may be the third milestone, right? So divide the milestones in the CRM. Keep a track of who's getting the emails, who's responding to what kind of content. Track all the emails that you send to people. See what emails are being opened. See what emails are not being opened. See who's opening it at what time in different geographies, and a CRM for this is very, very crucial, right? And because you're doing this as a mid to advanced stage organization, you have more responsibility to be organized because you're raising money for raising money.
Yeah.
Therefore, you should be really, really organized in all of this, right? Getting at least quarterly or half yearly online events where people can come in and talk, ensuring that you're communicating through physical mail, snail mail, celebrating their important days, getting them to contribute on their birthdays, etc., is very, very important.
Mhm.
So there are a few key steps in all of
Right.
this, right? Databasing, connecting, creating a system for databasing, connecting to the CRM, setting up a comms pipeline, a comms process, ensuring an engagement strategy. All of this is very, very critical to the whole process. And if you don't do it, it's most likely that you'll end up doing, either multiple crowdfunding campaigns that don't make any sense to you because you're asking for money
Right.
all the time with people who are not engaging at all,
Right.
right? So keeping these stages are important. Finally, I think if you're a really advanced organization and you've been in existence for 20, 25 years, it's a great place to try retail fundraising, and it's a great place to do it at a certain scale. Okay?
Mm.
So you can try online, offline models. You can try, different kinds of communication strategies, whether it's connecting directly with beneficiaries or doing gala events, and getting, people to feel a sense of the larger whole, right?
Right.
So I think there are different stages to try that, but I would say the most risk you can take is when you're starting out an organization. So get some incubator funding for sure, but start when I started as a fundraiser, one of the things that I used to do was ensure that 10 people contributed to my organization on a monthly recurring basis. And that's how I built my first 100 donors.
Right.
So I would call people, I would tell them about the cause. I would have a physical monthly debit form that I would courier them. They would fill it up, sign it, send it back to me. I'd send it to the bank, and I started adding them to the organizational database. And it took me 6 months kind of to build my first 100 donors. But each of these guys were donating 1,000 rupees a month, which is a lakh rupees a month. Um, and that's 12 lakh rupees, which was, I mean, more than the money that I was earning at that time.
Right.
So I ensured I was cost effective. And maybe this is something you want to do to your new fundraisers, right? Or for founders. How do
Mm.
you get 10 new people every month? And these are from your pool of friends, family, and pools, right? So keep targeting. And the good thing about retail fundraising is that it's from this larger pool that you will get your smaller pool of
Mhm.
HNI institutions, CSRs, because all of us work somewhere, all of us, kind of engage with different institutions in our day-to-day lives. We may have friends, and it's from this nurturing pool that you will take people out and who will become your bigger donors.
Right.
So taking it lightly is at your own risk.
No, thank you for that. I think I really liked how well you put it that retail fundraising is not simply about raising money, but it's about building a community of people. I think that's a very powerful idea to kind of take on. And also the fact that it's kind of any organization, no matter what size they are, there is a way for them to, kind of take on retail fundraising in different forms. So I think you already mentioned a little bit about, what some of the practical steps are in terms of building a database, in terms of building a comm strategy. Could you tell us a little bit more about that for, an organization that's like, yes, I've decided to start. But where? Like, it feels so daunting, right? To do all of these things, to plan timelines. So where would be like, what would be the first step for an organization to start?
First would be to build this. So most often, um, this becomes a founder's dilemma.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So getting the whole team on board is very important
Hmm.
because you can't do it as a single player. So as a founder, you can actually visit institutions, you can visit CSRs, etc., and represent the organization. But if you're the only one doing retail fundraising for your whole organization, it's going to fail. So you have to bring everyone on board. This would mean talking about why retail is important, telling them that we need a wider base, telling them that we need to be sustainable over the next 10 years, that this is deeply connected to our mission. So if you're someone, for example, that's working with any cause that is massy in nature, for example, if you're working with children, or if you're working with large amounts of pet animals, if you're working with um, even causes that are niche, for example, trafficking victims, right?
Right.
Um, India's problems are Indians' responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And our job really is, when we're saying we're building a community, we're connecting people to the problems that we face.
Right.
So, and if your team is not connected to the problems that you're facing or the problems that you have to solve, it's going to be a hard, long walk
Yeah.
for you to convince anyone else, right? I have
Right.
a minor infection in the eye, so that's why I'm slightly,
No,
you know. But um, the 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 real hard work is there, right?
Right.
How do you build internal community, right?
Right.
This also means that if you're a founder and you have a group of people who really believe in you, who are not your team, right? Forming some sort of a core committee around that. People who will engage with you and help you build this strategy as volunteers, as co-conspirators, as people who believe in your cause, right? What this does is it takes away the load from the organization,
Yeah.
and it kind of creates external mascots who will go out and promote you. So I think that's step one, and that's step most difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. The second step is around databasing, as I said, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get most organizations that exist don't do documentation really well,
Yeah.
right? So how do you actually connect all of these people together and put all of this information in a central database? I would say that, if you can fix your SEO, website, analytics, all of those things, and, build, like, connect a CRM to the back end and capture all of this data. For people who don't understand this, a CRM is a customer relationship management tool,
Right.
right? And so, just to kind of, how do you say this? Just to be a little organized about this, and a lot of this be. I want to say this to everyone, that a lot of this work can be done self-training or through minimal investments of 10 to 20,000 rupees, right? So it's inexpensive. So when your database is connected, when your website analytics is fixed, and all your information is in one place, then the next step is to say, okay, what is my style of communication?
Right.
Okay. Do I want to send funky newsletters? Do you want to send informative newsletters? Do you want to send human-centered stories? Do you want to get people to write for you? So, an interesting strategy is to see that the people who are in your closest network, will they represent you? Will they go out and write for you? Will they do an Instagram live on your behalf, right? Just to get them involved and engaged. So, when I say a common strategy, it's also to say, what's my language going to be like? How does this represent me in the most authentic way, right?
Right.
And that's really the comm strategy for you. And keep in touch with people on a frequent basis. So what happens is that there's a tool called priming, where
Okay.
you prepare people for, giving the donation, right? So you send them small nudges every month, every week, just so that the next time you ask for money, they're not caught by surprise, or
Yeah.
they don't feel like, you've not communicated to them in a long while, right? Now, all of this, like I said, is there is some cost involvement, but there is definitely time involvement in all of this,
Right.
right? And when I say time involvement, it means that there is a dedicated person doing this, right? And I would encourage you to find people who are creative, people who are willing to learn. So one of the challenges with young, old, mid-sized nonprofits is that there's very little investment in human development.
Right.
So when people come in, they need to be nurtured, given space and time to be able to do this. So you need to have that runway to kind of support a young resource to even learn all of this, right? But if you have money, if you've raised money for retail fundraising, then go ahead and hire an experienced marketer, hire an experienced sort of communications person, put them on the job to do this, right? But I don't think that's the first step. The first step is really to kind of experiment on your own, try a few things before you get on the hiring piece, right? And finally, keep the engine oiled. This is an engine. This is not a one-off, right? For people to give you money every month, right? Which means that you have to try new things, whether it's an Instagram live, whether it's a new landing page, whether it's an annual campaign, whether it's whether it's something like um, an annual a kind of gathering event which you do in every city, whether it's sending gifts or material to people where they feel acknowledged. It's a lot of all of those things, right? So I would say that plan this out. Think about all of this, right? And the larger your size, the greater the planning. The smaller your size, the lesser your planning.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you for laying that out so well, and just for highlighting the fact that the actual act of going out to people and raising the money comes later. There are lots of these smaller steps, but important steps that need to come before to kind of set the foundation. So that's really helpful. Kind of switching to organizations that might decide that they do not yet have the time or the resources to dedicate to such an activity. Are there kind of alternatives or maybe slightly more light touch versions of this that they could start to engage with to see if it is for them or not? Are there any kind of alternatives that exist?
So like I said, when I started out, I gave my target of 10 people every month.
Yeah.
And I think the step that you can't miss out at any stage is getting your team on board with this.
Right.
So building the org muscle to do this every month is very, very important. The second piece is doing this. The third thing is that with the whole crowdfunding thing, can you try a small campaign every year?
Yeah.
Right? Do one campaign, but I want to implore everyone to consider that do a campaign every year. Don't do it one-off, right? So make it part of your doing. And the thing that I did the reason why I'm saying this and the reason why we're discussing retail fundraising is that foreign funding is reducing.
Yeah.
It's harder to get domestic funding, right? Therefore, what you're essentially doing is the act of de-risking. So while building credibility, you're also de-risking yourself from many, many things. And in this process of de-risking, you need to have a reasonable percentage of your total money coming from diverse sources, right? So think of that number, right? So if you're a 10 lakh rupee organization, is 1 lakh rupees from online crowdfunding or offline crowdfunding useful?
Right.
And the mistake that I would caution everyone against is that when this money comes in, don't use it for programs. Use it for institution building.
Right.
Which means that put more money in building the engine, put money in building organizational capacity, hiring resources, put money into creating some sort of institutional memory, things that you won't get money for.
Right.
And I would say that using this as a way to leverage your organization's work, organization's sort of connections, etc., is the best way to do this. Right? Like, don't spend this like oh, this is free money, let me spend it on paying salaries.
Right.
So this is, in some ways, this is trying to manage multiple boats, right? While you are raising money for the programs, for the organization and all of that, you're also creating reserves that allow you to expand.
Right.
So that, now coming back to your question, crowdfunding campaigns annually, getting yourself to get 10 donors every month are some light touch ways in which you can do this, right? Again, going on online sort of chat like this, public presence, and asking people to donate right there and seeing if it actually results in people donating to your page or increases traffic on your page, right?
Right.
Are ways to do some of this. So, have a payment gateway,
Right.
have a Razor Pay or Dana Mojo, whatever on your website. Have a website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have an active website. I don't have one, but yeah, I would suggest that have something like that and see how it goes. And if you get traction,
Mm-hmm.
and traction in this is not one-time donation.
Right.
Traction in this is donations over a period of time. And analyzing when people are dropping off, why they're dropping off is very, very critical, right? So root cause analysis in this is very, very important.
Right. No, thank you for that. And I think everything that you kind of spoke about is also ties back into what you were saying. It's about building community, right? It's about kind of priming or building your community so that if and when you do kind of finally take that step, you have a community to go to in a sense.
Yeah.
I think you already touched a little bit about my final question, which was, what are some of the challenges that nonprofits should keep an eye out for, right? One was what you said about maybe not using it for regular programmatic funding, but what are some of the other challenges that you've seen come up in your experience that maybe people should just keep an eye out for?
So, 9 out of 10 nonprofits struggle with keeping in touch.
Right.
Right. It's one of the common pitfalls, and it's also a brand destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
If you only show up during Dhanotsav every year, or if you show up only during New Year's every year, people tend to not trust you.
Right.
So don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't promise things in your campaigns that you may not be able to deliver. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're telling that you're going to send them an acknowledgement, or if you're telling someone that they'll get a gift in return for something, or they'll get a thank you note, or they'll get a tax exemption, and if you screw up in any of these things, it's going to be problematic.
Right.
So it's very directly linked to organizational reputation, right?
Right.
So also representing your work in the most clear fashion, right? I mean, people shouldn't misconstrue what you're doing and give money in a way where they feel like, oh, I thought you did this, but you do
Mm-hmm.
this. So that's very important. Don't put in too much money into retail funding at one go. Do it incrementally, do it slowly, play the long game. Okay?
Right.
Um, Create mascots, and when you create mascots, ensure that they're engaged. Anybody who you give responsibility should feel like they're part of the organization, should feel like they have a say in this team, right? That's very, very important. Um, and I think, you know, people give for their connection to a cause. People don't give money
Mm-hmm.
because you are doing something, right? So we may
Right.
be doing the best work on the planet, but people aren't giving money for that. Right?
Right.
And so my submission to everyone is that fine tune your story so that it resonates with what people believe in.
Right.
Don't uh, don't make yourself the hero of the story. Make the person who's donating the hero of the story. Right. So narrative building is very important, and I think a lot of people fail on that. So academic content or technical content or technical communication doesn't work. And some of us in the social sector speak such technical language that we don't even know that we're speaking a language that other people don't understand, right? Because here it's also field building work.
Right.
We're talking to people who may not be from the sector.
Right.
So we need to speak easy language. And we don't need to take ourselves way too seriously while doing this.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to say in terms of just challenges.
Great. No, thank you so much. Those are some very practical and very useful tips and things for people to take away. Yeah, I just wanted to check if there's any other final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with, just to conclude, if there's anything we might have missed.
I would say that with 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 the kind of economic growth that we've experienced over the years, and
Mm-hmm.
with the kind of at least 20 crore Indians who are in the retail market. I mean, 20 crore Indians trade on the stock market, right? So
Yeah.
that's your population. So once again, we have a base of 20 crores. We don't have a base of 140 crores,
Right.
right? So within that base of 20 crores, can you sustain 5,000, 10,000 people over a 10-year period? think about that, build your strategy accordingly. Create some sort of modeling around this, do some Excel calculations, and most importantly, start building community. Because in the next 5 to 10 years, it's most likely that causes, particularly direct tangible causes, will find resonance with people, who are individuals, and less with, HNIs, and lesser and lesser with CSR as it matures, right? So that's a submission to everyone, and I'd say certainly try and give it a shot, and give it a shot over a long period of time.
Great. No, thank you so much for that. I think I've taken away a lot from this conversation, and I'm sure others have as well. I think the two key things that I will remember always is just it's about community, it's about consistency. So thank you so much for this, and yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Rishabh for this conversation.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.